Good morning, happy Monday. We're in the book of Colossians, written by Paul while he was in prison in Rome. Colossae is was this town about 100 miles away from Ephesus. We think, the last Christ Church trip to Turkey, we had communion where we thought Colossae was located. There was a lot of artifacts there, and there was a sign that said Colossae. We got back, and Biblical Archaeological Review suggested that maybe they've got the place wrong. Hard to believe, but anyway, it was this village on a trade route, and Paul had not been there, but he is writing to them. So this guy, Epaphras, has come to him. He hears they have problems. He does two things. He prays for them, and he writes. So Paul writes 13 of the New Testament's 27 books. They get divided in various ways. The letters that go to churches versus the letters that go to people. The letters that go to people, some of those are called pastoral epistles, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, because he's coaching young pastors about how to be a pastor. There's a number of books that he wrote from prison. Colossae is obviously one of them. So you can divide up Paul's letters. The book of Romans is sort of in its own category. It's the biggest letter that Paul wrote, and it's the most theological. He writes it to people he's never been there, so sort of the introduction to the faith and all those ideas. He'd not been to the Colossians, but they have been coached by somebody he had been spending time with. So several things to note today. We're setting up a rich passage that we'll look at for the next few days, Colossians 15 through 20. I just want to say three things and then read it for you. I have noted several times now that Paul is writing to counter false teachers, but we don't know who the false teachers are. So I just want to note there's likely a reason for this, and that is just like you have TV, some sort of pact that has been made that says we're not going to talk about and esteem and elevate the mass murderer. Or we're not going to show the person that runs out into the middle of the football field during the game. Like the TV cameras are going to go dead. So we're not going to encourage anyone else to seek this kind of notoriety. So instead, what we get in Colossians 1:15 is what I'll say is a great offense. Paul's approach is not to name the false teachers and then go after them as much as he's going to talk about Jesus and esteem them. So, filming this a week in advance, but I know that we're going to hear a lot as we head towards the Super Bowl. We're going to hear a lot during the Super Bowl that that Kansas City wants to do everything they can to keep Tom Brady off the field. And that the Buccaneers want to do everything they can to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field, right? There's a sense in which the best defense is a strong offense, and we see that, the elevation of Christ in the gospel. The second thing to note is the focus of Paul on the basics. He goes deep, but they're always sort of foundational truths. And he always starts with the big ideas. So a lot of his books, easy to see in something like Ephesians, where you've got 6 chapters, 3 are theological, 3 are more practical. But you see this focus on the basics. Theological basics are not like other basics. In math, you learn that 2 + 2 = 4 before you do calculus, and in English, you learn your ABCs and how to spell cat before you move on to bigger words, bigger ideas. In theology, the basics, the foundation, the first principles are these radical, big, countercultural claims about a God who owns everything. And you have to start there to build your world. And so we see Paul doing that. And then the final thing I'll note is in light of that, there is an understanding that we are all theologians. Everyone is a theologian. The question is not whether or not you have thoughts about God. The question is whether your thoughts about God, my thoughts about God, are any good. Do they line up with who He is? And so we've got this focus on the basics. So in light of that, let me read this passage for you today. We'll pick it up tomorrow. It's talking about Jesus. Colossians 1:15, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. That is a very rich passage. We'll be looking at it the rest of this week. Have a good day.